All right, let's begin here. UN Security Council briefing is currently underway on the situation in Ukraine. Now, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres addressed the meeting a short while ago.
He said the war on Ukraine must stop now, as it also threatens peace and security in the rest of the world. I think it is the US ambassador to the UN now speaking. Let's take you back live.
Bearing the brunt of Europe's most significant refugee crisis since World War II. And I want these countries to know that they have a committed partner in the United States. And that is why the United States announced recently that we are prepared to provide more than $1 billion in new funding toward humanitarian assistance for those affected by Russia's war in Ukraine and its severe impact around the world. And it is why we are welcoming up to 100,000 Ukrainians and others fleeing Russia's aggression to the United States. We will continue to assist humanitarian efforts to help the people of Ukraine and all those fleeing Putin's violence. But as heart-wrenching as the stories are that I heard in Moldova and Romania, there are some stories we will never get to hear. Those of the people we saw in the images out of Bucha. We've all seen the gruesome photos. Lifeless bodies lying in the streets, apparently summarily executed, their hands tied behind their backs. As we work to independently confirm the events depicted in these images, I would remind this council that based on the currently available information, the United States has assessed that members of Russia's forces have committed war crimes in Ukraine. And even before seeing the images from Bucha, President Zelensky, along with others in the region, were reporting that children were being abducted, and we heard him say that today. Also abducted are mayors and doctors, religious leaders, journalists, and all who dare defy Russia's aggression. Some of them, according to credible reports, including by the Mariupol City Council, have been taken to so-called filtration camps, where Russian forces are reportedly making tens of thousands of Ukrainian citizens relocate to Russia. Reports indicate that Russian federal security agents are confiscating passports and IDs, taking away cell phones, and separating families from one another. I do not need to spell out what these so-called filtration camps are reminiscent of. It's chilling, and we cannot look away. Every day we see more and more how little Russia respects human rights. And that is why I announced yesterday that the United States, in coordination with Ukraine and many other UN member states, will seek Russia's suspension from the UN Human Rights Council. Given the growing mountain of evidence, Russia should not have a position of authority in a body whose very purpose is to promote respect for human rights. Not only is this the height of hypocrisy, it is dangerous. Russia is using its membership on the Human Rights Council as a platform for propaganda to suggest Russia has a legitimate concern for human rights. In fact, we will hear some of that propaganda here today, I know. And I will not dignify these lies with a response, only to say that every lie we hear from the Russian representative is more evidence that they do not belong on the Human Rights Council. 140 UN member states voted to condemn Russia over its unprovoked war and the humanitarian crisis it has unleashed upon the people of Ukraine. Here's my message to all of you. Now is the time to match those words with action and show the world that we can work responsibly. And I share President Zelensky's view that this moment requires responsible world powers and global leaders to show some backbone and stand up to Russia's dangerous and unprovoked threat against Ukraine and the world. The Secretary General said that confronting this threat is the Security Council's charge. It is, and it is also the responsibility of UN leaders and leaders around the world, every single member state with a voice in the GA. No one can be a shield for Russia's aggression. Suspending Russia from the Human Rights Council is something we collectively have the power to do in the General Assembly. Our votes can make a real difference. Russia's participation on the Human Rights Council hurts the Council's credibility. It undermines the entire UN, and it is just plain wrong. Let us come together to do what is right and do right by the Ukrainian people. Let us take this step to help them to start to rebuild their lives. And let us match the courage of President Zelensky, who we are so honored to have with us today. President Zelensky, I want you to know that we stand with the people of Ukraine as you face down this brutal attack on your sovereignty, on your democracy, and on your freedom. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United States for her statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Albania.
Thank you, Madam President. Let me thank Ambassador Nusibe for having steered our work during the month of March and wish the UK and you, Madam President, full success in our common work during this month. Albania welcomes President Zelensky's presence to this meeting. His remarks are painful, and his account on what Ukraine is experiencing under Russian occupation is revolting. We stand by you, Mr. President, by your compatriots, all Ukrainians, for their heroic resistance, for their resilience that the entire world is admiring. You are not alone. You have the world on your side, because it's the side of the right, of the just, and as we hope, of victory. Slava Ukraini. Madam President, let me thank SG Guterres for his, again, very clear and powerful remarks. I also thank USG DiCarlo and Griffiths for their updates. This is the 14th meeting of the Security Council on Ukraine since the 31st of January, while the war of aggression has entered the second month. Let's establish a few basic yet meaningful facts. Russia has stalled and its imperial dreams are nowhere. Taking Ukraine finally proved impossible. Kiev was too hard to swallow. Russian army is in disarray, but it has not stopped shelling and bombardments. But all this is not new, and all this is not news. The real news that has horrified the world is what Russia is leaving behind. The unspeakable horrors, those soul-crushing images in areas from which Russia is withdrawing. Images of civilians executed with a bullet in the neck, sometimes with their hands tied behind their backs or shot dead in their bicycles. Images of mass graves overflowing with corpses. Images of carnage and devastation, including looted homes, rape, and sexual violence, acts usually attributed only to thugs. They spring from the same cruel impulses as the bombardment of cities, homes, hospitals, schools, and kindergartens by the Russian forces. Bucha is an open-air graveyard, the notorious facelift of the Russian aggression. Madam President, we have heard time and again, it is not Russia. Yes, but no. It will be hard, actually impossible, to convince anyone that the destroyed tanks that clutter the roads, the mines and booby traps left behind amidst the wreckage, and the bodies of civilians killed by arbitrary executions and laying in the streets amidst debris are staged scenes for propaganda. Who would believe that Russia aggressed Ukraine simply to protect civilians, while Ukraine is busy staging horror movies? You may muzzle media back home, but you cannot fool satellite images. You cannot blind independent reporters and human rights NGOs on the ground. Waiting for Russia to accept and tell the truth is waiting for Godot to arrive, and he never does. These are facts, hard and sickening proof of the atrocities committed, the ugly face of this madness. Such crimes, as documented by Human Rights Watch and verified by independent and respected professional reporters, those who are banned for the Russians call for answers, call for thorough investigation, for effective accountability, for justice. Prime Minister Rama called these crimes a terrible pain and a horrible shame. Russia has an international obligation to abide by international humanitarian law, the laws of war, including the Geneva Conventions of 1949 and its first additional protocol. Russia has an obligation to abide by the order of ICJ to immediately halt its military activity in Ukraine. But unfortunately, Russia has made another choice, not to respect any of it, and has cancelled itself from international law. But the law will pursue it. Russian army and its commanders cannot escape accountability. The name of the butcher of Mariupol, a criminal that has reduced an entire city to ashes and has made its citizens go from 3 meals a day to barely 3 meals a week, is engraved in the ruins of the city. This is why we will support the call to suspend Russia's participation in the Human Rights Council. The UNGA resolution that created the Council stipulates that, and I quote, members of the Council will respect the highest standards in the promotion and protection of human rights. As we see, Russia's standards are nose-eating, and its presence there is a farce, a desecration of the place that is called to be the sanctuary of rights. Dear colleagues, Russia has announced that it will now shift its focus on eastern Ukraine. This means that it will concentrate its brutality there in what may end up becoming a war of attrition. Russia has blocked the renewal of the OSCE International Observer Mission in Ukraine. This denies the international community the independent eyes it needs there. This anticipates, sadly, more war, further atrocities, other crimes, even more humanitarian disasters. This war continues to particularly affect women and children. Millions have been displaced, many of them alone, in search of safety and security. It is heartbreaking to see mothers write names and addresses in the back of their children so that they are recognized in case they end up being orphans. We welcome the efforts of OCHA and its partners to deliver assistance in support of the people in Ukraine and the millions of refugees in neighboring countries. Madam President, let me end with this note. Rarely has the outcome of a war been so disastrously the complete opposite of what it wanted to achieve. Russia's army has been defeated by the outgunned and outnumbered Ukrainian resistance. Russia is isolated like never in its history. It has become the world's most sanctioned country in history. No country has ever seen itself transform in a matter of only 10 days from a global player into a financial and international pariah, to the point that it is obliged to find comfort in the support from North Korea and Syria. Dear colleagues, this aggression and its startling defeat have once and for all separated the fates of Ukrainians and Russians, because the case of Ukraine is also the cause of democracy against tyranny and kleptocracy. It is a fight between the will of the people against the vicious.
And that is, of course, the UN Security Council briefing on Ukraine, and that is the representative to Albania who is talking about how, the situation, if Russia is anything to go by, Francis, in that sitting, whatever it is that has been reported of what is happening currently in Ukraine through Russia's eyes is not convincing, because they are seeing what is happening on the ground, and that is what he is saying, and also even saying that that, for them, they are calling for the truth to be really reported when it comes to exactly what is going on from Russia's side.